Hey everyone, it's Peter Kerr from Rock Daydream Nation, and boy, have we got a show for you. We are going to pick the top five greatest AOR albums of all time. I've got Tim Durling from Tim's Vinyl Confessions, and I've got the Parish of Rock from the Contrarians. What is AOR? It's got different meanings in different territories. To us in Australia, we think of it as called American orientated rock, but to other folks in other territories, it's album orientated rock. I was thinking about this. I think this is rock that plays really nicely on radio. So it's rock that can transfer. You turn on the radio and it's ready to go. It's not too starchy and spiky. It's got beautiful playing, and usually the vocalist is just top notch. So Tim, I'm going to throw it over to you. What is your first pick? Your five favorite AOR albums of all time?
Well, I agree with you completely, Peter. I always used to refer to bands like this as radio rock, which means it was no surprise to hear these were the rock bands that you heard on the radio and had hits on a regular basis. These were not metal bands, these were not hard rock bands. But on the other hand, this wasn't yacht rock, this wasn't soft rock either. This was rock. It just struck that balance, and I mean, you could say it had enough of a pop sensibility that the edges were, smoothed off. And yeah, very hard time picking these choices. But my first one I'm going to go with is the only way I could do this. I didn't number them. I put them in chronological order. So my first one came out in 1982. And I promise not all of my selections are going to be Canadian, although I could have done that. But this one just happens to be. I think this is a fantastic album and an artist that doesn't get enough attention. Aldo Nova. Aldo Nova, born Aldo Capriccio. I've never heard the name spelled or pronounced, so I could be pronouncing it wrong. But he's from Montreal, and he is a multi-instrumentalist. He can sing, he plays guitar, he plays keyboards, he writes, he produces, he arranges. He's a one man. He could be a one man band. He basically this album, which was released on Portrait CBS in early 1982, is pretty much made up of demos that he had worked on for the past couple years at the famous Power Station Studios in New York City. And there wasn't a lot done to it. It was basically put out as is. And he pretty much plays everything on this except the drums. But the great thing is that it doesn't sound like it. It sounds like a band in a studio playing together. There's a great, even though it's very polished, there's a great live off the floor feel to this. Of course, if anybody knows who Aldo Nova is, it's because of the first song on this, Fantasy, which is an AOR classic. But this album, I think, just goes from strength to strength with Hot Love, It's Too Late, Ball and Chain, Heart to Heart, Under the Gun. This is a fantastic album. I'm happy to say it's a 2 million seller in the US, so it does have the sales to back it up. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to maintain that success, but I think he's put out a lot of great music since then. And he actually kind of got back into the game a couple of years ago and put out a couple EPs and like a mini LP. And I hope he does another full length album because I'm a huge fan of this guy. And I think this is AOR at its finest. So I would recommend this album to anyone who likes that rock that's at equal mix of keyboards and guitars. He's a really good guitar player. He can shred with the best of them. So yeah, that's my first choice. Self-titled debut from Aldo Nova from 1982.
Well, I've got that. I'm not really familiar. I don't think that broke through in Australia. What about the UK, Parish? Are you familiar?
I've got that album. I think I've got a couple of albums. Yeah, he was Sounds liked him, and I picked it up reading the review in Sounds. Um, yeah, I mean, he is AOR, but you could also argue he's kind of a bit pop rock in some ways, and I would suggest there's even a bit of an overlap with sort of some of the Bon Jovi stuff as well. I would suggest so. A bit of a mix, but yeah, really good album, very good pick.
Yeah, Well, that's what this show's all about. There are blurred boundaries, aren't there? And we'll find out there are some that go into different categories. All right, Parish, what's your first pick?
Well, before I go into my first pick, when I told Mrs. Parish I was coming out to do this show and I said it was about AOR, she defined AOR as any old rubbish. So there you go. That's basically anything I like is kind of what she thinks is AOR. Well, I'm going to stick with Canada. And so for my number 5, I'm going with Loverboy. Get Lucky. I think this has got one of the best AOR songs on it, Working for the Weekend, which I think is an absolute classic, absolutely brilliant. They beat Van Halen to Jump, so that's another good song on it. Lucky Ones, Take Me to the Top, came out in 81 or 82, I'm trying to remember
81.
now. 82, 81. So, but, sort of right in the centre of AOR's sort of, big stint, particularly in America. This did nothing over here, but I think it was quite a big album in the States. I really like Loverboy. I got into them with the first album, which I didn't pick because I don't think it's as AOR as this one. I think there's elements of new wave on the first album.
I agree. I agree totally.
So I didn't pick it for that reason, but I think it's as good. But yeah, that's my number 5. This is the only album I kind of played around with on which one I was going to pick off my list. But yeah, I just a great album, I think. And as I say, one of the best AOR songs with Working for the Weekend.
Yeah, what a cracker. I love that band. And they had an amount of chart success in Australia. And they were going to tour this year, first time ever in Australia, but it got pulled. So unfortunately, but hopefully one day I get to see them. No, that's a really good pick. All right, my first one is Survivor, Eye of the Tiger. I love this band, and I think Eye of the Tiger is one of the greatest rock anthems ever recorded. I'll put it out there. We've got a number of sporting teams in Australia that are called the Tigers, and when they come out onto the field, guess what gets played? Eye of the Tiger. It's just such a fist pump in the air type of song. But beyond that, there's so many great songs on this album. They've got Children of the Night, American Heartbeat. Ever since the world began, the secret to the success of this band is the vocals of Dave Bickler. I'm a Dave Bickler fan. He's been in and out of the band multiple times. But to me, he's the voice of Survivor. I love the instrumentation. Frankie Sullivan on lead and rhythm guitars. What I really like about this album is the drum sound. It's got this really big, beefy bass drum sound of Mark Drobet. So I think this is perfect AOR. It's well crafted. They are much more than Eye of the Tiger. I think you've got to really check out this album. All right, Tim, what's your next pick?
My next pick is a band, Peter, that you and I have talked about before. This might not be an obvious album for people to pick, but I have gone on record as saying it is my favorite album from this band, and it is probably the truest AOR album by this band because they're such good musicians and they can literally play anything and have. I'm talking about Toto, and my album of choice is their 1984 album, Isolation. I think this is an incredibly good album. Unfortunately, it did not sell the way that the previous album, Toto 4, had. They lost their primary lead vocalist, Bobby Kimball, and they got Fergie Fredrickson in, who was in the band LaRue, who's a completely different sounding singer. I still, to this day, wonder if Fergie ever got an offer to join Yes when one of the vacancies came up, because I find he reminds me a slight bit of John Anderson. I know I said that to Peter, and he's like, no, not at all. But he's got that high, clear voice that cuts through all of the instrumentation. But I think this is an incredible album. I think it's one of their more guitar-oriented albums, and I just think the songs are fantastic. The best known song from this album is probably my favorite Toto song, Stranger in Town. I think that's such a cool little story song. And that's not even one Fergie sings. That's a David Paich song. He wrote it and sang it. It's got a really cool black and white video with the actor Brad Dourif. Um, Angel Don't Cry is an immaculate AOR song with Fergie on vocals. Jeff Porcaro just pounding behind the drums. This band is just so immaculate and perfect at what they do. How does it feel as a Steve Lukather ballad, which should have been a hit? It was a single, but it should have been a big hit. Endless, one of their best songs. Again, it rocks, but it's got the synths and it's got that undeniable melody. The title song is fantastic. Mr. Friendly. I love this album to death. It only went gold in the US and their career never really recovered. But I think for a lot of fans, this has become a cult favorite. And I would recommend anyone, even if you think that all there is to Toto is Rosanna and Africa, and you sing AOR, I don't hear AOR. Check out the Isolation album. So that's my next pick.
Yeah, a cracker of an album. I love that album, and you know that, Tim. And you could also classify that as a new wave album, a synth pop album, or a pop. So this goes into the boundaries of AOR. Yeah. If you had it on a chart, it sort of blends into different genres, but great album. And probably it would have been more successful if they didn't wait too long, the gap between albums. Maybe if it came out within a year of Toto 4, it would have done much bigger business.
The frequency when you put out albums meant everything in the 80s. People forgot you because other bands came along. So if this had come out in late 83, yes, they might have notched up another platinum album.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Parish, what's your next pick?
Okay, well, my next pick is pretty controversial, I think. I'm not sure many other people will consider this an AOR album. It'll be interesting to see what people say. And I was delighted to see you talk to the band about this album just a few weeks ago. Abominog by Uriah Heep. So I think this is an AOR album. You could argue their next one, Head First, was even more AOR, but I much prefer this album. Tracks like Too Scared to Run, On the Rebound, Running with a Lion, I think are AOR songs, but more than anything, that's the way that it is. I just think is the AOR classic that should have been number one around the world, but for some reason wasn't. Interesting when you did your interview with them that they said about how Geffen wanted to pick them up and run with this album in the States because they saw the opportunity maybe for it to be a big hit in the States. So I'm not the only one. I think the cover probably makes most people think it's not AOR. I have read people say it's Uriah Heep's new wave of British heavy metal album. So I suppose there is overlaps in different places. But for me, that's AOR at its best. And yeah, if you want to just listen to one song from it, that's the way that it is. It's just absolutely brilliant.
Well, guess what? That's my next pick too. So we're going to overlap with each other. Love this album. So this band, 1979, 1980, they were on the skids. They were ready to fold up and, got Lee Kerslake, got Bob Daisley, started to put a band together, got Pete Golby, and then the rest is history. This wonderful, wonderful album. It is AOR from top to bottom. There is a bit of hard rock. There's a little bit of new wave. But to me, it is just melodic rock at its best. And considering there are 5 cover songs on this album, it shouldn't work, but it does. On the Rebound, Russ Ballard. Running All Night with The Lion, Prisoner, D.B. Cooper, James Lance, Tony Riparetti. That's the Way It Is. Paul Bliss. It's just great. And I think the cover did scare off a lot of people in overseas territory, seeing the Demon. If it had a different cover, it should have broken through. If it was on Geffen, it would have had the marketing push, and it would have competed with the Survivors, the Foreigners, and the Night Rangers. But it just wasn't meant to be. But I just love everything about this album, and I think you've got to wrap it around the vocals of Pete Golby. He had a voice that had that wonderful range. It was super melodic, and it punched out at the speakers. He had that vocals that could compete with the Lou Grahams and the others of that type. Yeah, Abominog for me, that's my number 4 pick, and I think it's a cracking album. And I think, when people look at the Uriah Heep discography, Parish, of course, they're going to go down the David Byron era with Demons and Wizards, Look at Yourself. But I think this album is the other one that people pick out of all the other lineups as the album of choice. You look on YouTube, people are talking about it more. I think this has got a cult reputation, and I'd like to see the album sales. I reckon it ticks over, this album.
Yeah. I mean, definitely it's found favour now more than it did. I mean, I was always a Heep fan, and even the albums in the late 70s that everybody knocks, I quite like them as well. But this was definitely a tour de force. But the next one, Head First, is a really good AOR album as well. So they did the two of them. Yeah, it's just a shame it didn't get more traction. It did get them back into the UK album charts though, so it did have some success over here.
It did. And a quick shout out to producer Ashley Howe. The work he does on this album, he really molds this 70s classic rock band into something that was contemporary for 1981, and also the keyboard work of John Sinclair. He disposed of the Hammond organ and brought in all these wonderful synth lines that just sounded so contemporary for that era. And I know people think this era is very dated, but to my ears, it sounds fresh. I love it. Tim, are you aware of this album? Is this in your collection?
I don't have any Heep in my collection. I have heard songs from it. It sounds good. I've just never taken the plunge. It's such a huge catalog. I will say I have to think that album cover hurt this album because it doesn't fit at all. That's an AOR album in heavy metal clothing. I mean, that album cover is almost as off-putting as Black Sabbath's Born Again. That should have had just a nice classy black and white band shot or something, or I don't know, some Roger Dean artwork or Hypnosis or something, but not that cheap looking mask. But
yeah,
I think it damaged the sales long term, but
Yeah.
I think in the height of what was going on in the UK at the time, I think they picked up initially. I mean, I bought the album because of the album cover. I mean, I liked Heep anyway. I probably would have got it in the fullness of time. But I remember going into the record store and seeing that album cover and just thought, I've got to have that. This is Heep. This is going to be Heep back to their heaviest. Now, I wasn't disappointed because, as I say, I'm an AOR fan, so I love the album. But I do think it probably got people buying it initially. But I think very quickly that probably ran out of steam, and that's why it wasn't a big hit as an album, I think.
Yeah.
I think if they had signed to Geffen, I think Geffen, especially like if John Kolodner had been working and he would have said, "You're not putting it out with that album cover." Like, he would have had something else,
Yeah.
And it could have been as big as Asia. I mean, that was another, Geffen signing, right? Where they took and not, a quote unquote new band, but a bunch of old British guys. And next thing you know, they got a 5 million selling debut album. They could have done that with Uriah Heep. I mean, that could have done the business that 2 years later Perfect Strangers did for Deep Purple, people respecting the band name. But yeah, that album covers, I mean, we could do a whole episode on unfortunate album covers or misnomer album covers, but
yeah. Look, do yourself a favor, Tim. Invest in it. Get the album. I don't think you'd be disappointed. I think you'd like it. It's really in your wheelhouse, mate. So that's
from what I've heard,
hearty recommendation. Get it.
Yeah, I've seen I watched the video for That's the Way That It Is, and I get such a kick out of old videos anyway. It's a catchy song for sure. And And shout out to my friend Kevin Julie that has a website called outsiderrock.ca. He interviews a lot of different musicians and producers that don't often get interviewed. And the last thing he sent me, he interviewed Ashley Howe. So that might be of some interest there.
Absolutely. And just a plug, I'm doing an interview with Ashley Howe in a couple of weeks on Rock Daydream Nation. Check that out.
You're getting the interviews, man. That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. So
all right,
I'm going to return to a band that Peter has already mentioned, but I'm going to skip ahead a couple of years. Survivor, Vital Signs, 1984. Now, of course, you couldn't escape Eye of the Tiger. I would have been 8 years old, and it was just one of those songs that was everywhere. It was a rock song that everybody liked. Parents liked Eye of the Tiger. It was, it was fun. Everybody could sing along with it. So that was my introduction to Survivor. It was probably not until the early 2000s that I realized they even had an album in 1983, because Caught in the Game was such a flop album, even though it's got some good songs on it. The next thing I remember seeing from Survivor was the video to the song The Moment of Truth from the first Karate Kid soundtrack. I just remember seeing it once. And then that fall of 84, I remember hearing the song I Can't Hold Back. And I'm like, wow, this is good. This is really, really good. And honestly, I didn't realize they'd switch singers. I think Dave Bickler was a fine vocalist, absolutely. One of my favorite songs in Eye of the Tiger is Feels Like Love, actually. That's one of my favorites, but that's one of my favorite Survivor songs. But Jimmy Jamison, that guy, I think, had just vocal cords of gold. I think that guy had just such an amazing voice that was so listenable, and he made it sound easy to hit these. He hit these high notes, but you didn't cringe when he hit them. He was so smooth at it. He was so talented, and we lost him way too soon. This album got them back, because any momentum that they had gained with Eye of the Tiger, the single and the album, was in a year's time was lost. It's amazing how badly Caught in the Game tanked, barely charted, and like I said, I didn't even know they had an album out then. But this album brought them back to the charts in a big way. I think this is a double platinum album in the US. I Can't Hold Back was a big hit. High on You was an even bigger hit. That is just pure ear candy. They had the big ballad, The Search Is Over. So they had 3 big songs from this album. It really solidified that they were back. Unfortunately, it didn't last, because like I've said many times, we are moving into that later 80s period where bands that were a little bit harder, a little bit heavier, were taking all the focus away from bands like Survivor that paved the way. But this entire album is fantastic. This is not a band that did good singles and the rest of the songs were just album tracks. Broken Promises. What a fantastic song. Should have been a huge hit. Popular Girl. Ditto. Everlasting should have been another single from this album, and it would have been another hit ballad. First Night. First Night was a single, but it wasn't a hit. I think this is a flawless AOR album. I think that Frankie Sullivan and Jim Peterick were on a songwriting roll. I don't know what the beef is between those two guys. I wish they'd put the band back together and put out a legitimate version of Survivor again. But this is a fantastic album that, even though it was a successful album, it doesn't get mentioned as much as it should, I don't think. I think this album should be mentioned alongside the Journey Escape, Foreigner 4, Loverboy Get Lucky. I think it's that good. I can't find any errors with this album. It's got everything that makes this kind of music appealing to lots of different people, but I still go back to it because it's feel-good music. So that's my next choice.
Yeah, look, I love that album too. I think that's just slightly behind Eye of the Tiger for me, and I think it's a pretty flawless album. Well, do you agree with what I said? I really think for an AOR band, they've got such a beefy engine room with the bass and the drums.
Yeah, they were never quite the same when they lost that rhythm section. Mark Gervais and Stefan Ellis. And they anchored these songs and made them sound, even like
Beefy.
tougher than they were. Very beefy. I had a really hard time between this and When Seconds Count because I love both of those albums dearly. But I got to be honest, I love Burning Heart more than either of them, and that's not on any other album, any other studio albums. But and Burning Heart is one of my all-time favorite songs of any genre, of any band, anywhere, anytime. I hear that song and I almost want to exercise. That's how much that song pumps me up.
Well, I've got a question for you. Are you a Rocky fan? What do you prefer, Rocky 3 or Rocky 4? Come on.
I am going to shock everybody unless they've seen my shows. I'm not a movie buff. Honest to God, I have never seen any of the Rocky movies. So I got no... I have no dog in that fight.
Rocky 3, I would say, but Rocky 4 is very close behind. I mean, Rocky 3 probably because it was the first Rocky film I saw. Yeah. And it's obviously got Eye of the Tiger and just fantastic. But yeah, Rocky 4 and that scene in Russia when he's training out.
The montage, yes.
The famous montage.
And then the Survivor kick in, so yeah, brilliant. Both are brilliant films. And if you don't like the films, watch it for the music. So there you go.
I saw Rocky 4 at the drive-in, and when they had the montage, the people were beeping the horns in the drive-in theater. I loved it. It was like, ugh. All right, Parish, what's your next pick?
Okay, well, my last 3 albums, these are not just my top 3 albums of AOR. I would say these 3 albums would be my top 10 albums of all time. So these are albums I absolutely adore. I'm not sure, again, whether everybody would agree this is AOR. I'm going to 1990. I'm going to a supergroup. And I'm going with Damn Yankees. So... obviously, with Tommy Shaw and Jack Blades, you've definitely got AOR credentials in there. Ted Nugent, maybe not quite so much. But you've got Coming of Age opens up the album. I just think that's that guitar riff to open up the whole album is fantastic. Bad Reputation, Run, Run Away, High Enough, Come Again, Mystified. That they are, to me, just brilliant AOR tracks. You've got a few heavier songs like Damn Yankees, Pile Driver, when they let Ted loose a little bit on the album. But generally, I think they keep him subdued. They get the best out of him, and they just write some of the best AOR songs of all time. And for an album like that to do so well in 1990, I mean, it was a 2 million selling album. Did pretty well. I remember when I first read about it in Kerrang, I thought it was going to be crap. I just thought, here's 3 has-beens and a nobody. This is just going to be so bad. And yet, I heard probably Coming of Age on the radio, and it just blew me away. And I got the album, and they just look like they're having so much fun as well. They look like a band of brothers. They look like they're enjoying themselves. Maybe set free from the trials and tribulations they'd had with their previous bands, and yeah, just a bundle of fun in my view. So that's my number 3, Damn Yankees debut album.
That's a good pick. I think the success of that album actually surprised a lot of people because I think AOR was kind of on the ropes in the early 90s or around 1990. Wouldn't you agree, Tim? And that was one that sort of popped out of the box a little bit.
They were very, very canny, I would say. Very, very smart at the marketing because it had just enough hard rock in it, and they didn't look like a bunch of guys in their mid-30s, except Nugent. But he's definitely a hard rock guy. So it worked. And grunge, like a lot of people say, well, in 1990 you got grunge. No, that's not a factor at this point. But a lot of the times these supergroups don't work. The Firm didn't work. Blue Murder didn't work. Damn Yankees worked. What you had with Jack and Tommy was these 2 guys who found simpatico songwriting partners and also sang wonderfully together. Like we're able not every two singers that have good voices sound good singing together, but they're like Sammy Hagar and Michael Anthony. They just blended so well. So that album, yes, I guess you could call it a late period AOR album. I mean, you do have Ron Nevison producing. So Ron Nevison is like an AOR producer. He produced the two Survivor albums I was just raving about. So it's a really good production. Um, Coming of Age was a good first single because it was a hard rock song that was catchy enough to get on the radio. Wasn't a big hit single, but it opened the doors. And I remember people started talking about this band, and I don't remember anybody saying, "Oh, it's a bunch of old guys," because I just don't think they knew. Now the funny thing is that I knew about this band right before they came out. I remember reading about it because I had literally at the end of 1989 just gotten way into Night Ranger. And then they find out that they broke up. And that has happened to me so many times. I get into a band and, oh, they broke up 5 years ago, or they're about to break up. So I was like, well, that sucks. But what a second act for Jack Blades. And High Enough is one of the best power ballads ever, bar none. That's a very special song for my wife and I for various reasons. Um, Huge hit, number 3 hit. The album outsold anything Night Ranger did, and that song charted higher in the U.S. than any of Night Ranger songs, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. They still play that song. Usually they play Coming of Age too when you see Night Ranger live. But what I never would have thought about it as AOR, but Parish is right. What is Runaway if not a perfect AOR song? But I think that you don't think about it because it's 1990. So they got by disguised as a hard rock band, but there was too darn much melody in there to stay unbridled. So it just leaked through. Even on the heavier songs, they had hooks for days. Now, unfortunately, I think The Lightning in a Bottle was all about that first album. I think the second album, Don't Tread, it's all right, but it's not nowhere near as good. And I'm still kicking myself for discovering that first Damn Yankees album on vinyl at a store for $10, and like I'll think about it, and I didn't buy it.
Yeah. Well, I
Just
think
a few
it
years
was
ago.
diminishing returns because I don't think the subsequent albums did as well. But I think that's met the brief, Parish. That's a good pick. My next pick, I know, is one of Tim Durling's all-time favorite bands, and I'm going to talk about Journey. I'm going to put a spotlight on Journey. No, I'm not going to talk about Escape. I'm going to talk about my favorite Journey album, which is Frontiers. Now, what I like about Frontiers, it's a little harder, it's a little darker, and it's more synth-driven. It had 4 top 40 hits, and I think it's one of the defining AOR albums of the 1980s. So the opening track is one of my favorite Journey songs, which is Separate Ways, in parentheses, Worlds Apart. I love it. That crunchy guitar sound and the synths coming in. And, I love it. To me, it sums up 1981 or whatever year it came out. I love it. Chain Reaction, that's got a bit of crunch. And then you've got the Lighters in the Air power ballad of Faithfully, which is part of the Journey song staple to this very day. But what I like about this album, side 2, it's really dark. Edge of the Blade, Troubled Child, Back Talk, Black Talk. Back Talk. It's all. I think this band was going through a lot of turmoil. They had a lot of interpersonal relationship issues, and it's pouring out. The art is pouring out into their music, and it makes it interesting. And this album got kind of critically, I wouldn't say reviled, but it was sort of like, But that's their problem, because there is a lot that's bubbling underneath the surface of this album. There's a lot of drama, there's a lot of emotion, and you've got one of the greatest AOR singers of all time in Steve Perry. You've got one of the greatest guitarists in Neil Schon, the king of the outro lead guitarist. He does these wonderful, nifty Jonathan Cain. It's just the perfect AOR band, isn't it, Tim?
I am so happy you said that because Frontiers is also my favorite Journey album. I think Escape is fantastic, but there's 2 reasons that just off the bat where I give Frontiers the nod. I've always really liked that album. I've always been a big fan of that album, but radio and popular culture in general has ruined Don't Stop Believin' for me. Ruined. It comes on the radio, I have to change the channel. Used to be one of my all-time favorite songs. I cannot stand to listen to it now. It's just, I've heard it too much. On the other hand, it is not possible for me to hear Separate Ways too many times. That comes on, and I still crank up the radio. I was never the biggest fan of Open Arms. I always thought it was very, very sappy. But Faithfully, fantastic ballad. Fantastic rock ballad. A much better song, in my opinion, even though it didn't chart as high. So that's two reasons right there, the big hit singles. But I think this whole album, I mean, side one is basically singles. Send Her My Love is a great sort of lost Journey hit. It only was like a mid-20s song, but I think it's fantastic. I think it's sort of occupies that Who's Crying Now space, but it's different. And again, Neil's guitar lines, like you said, like it's just, he makes it sound easy, but it's not, because if it was, everything would sound like Muzak. It wouldn't. He makes these really memorable melodies, to say nothing of Perry's vocals. Chain Reaction is a fantastic rock song. I like After the Fall. That was another sort of lost hit for them. But side two, yeah, the Dark Horse tracks. I remember I couldn't believe when I first heard Edge of the Blade. I'm like, I can't believe how heavy this song is for Journey. And I remember playing it for people, and it's like, by the way, that's Journey. That's the very next song after Faithfully. I like Troubled Child. I really do. I think Perry's vocal is fantastic on that. It's moody. It's dark, like you said. You know, a lot of people will say, oh, that album would have been so much better if Only the Young and Ask the Lonely had been put on there, which they were recorded for that album. I'm glad they didn't. I love both of those songs, especially Ask the Lonely, but I like the fact that we got the full album and then we had these two extra songs to discover later. So I don't think it's lacking anything, all the way up until Rubicon, the last song on it. I think it almost made my list. Let's put it that way. I had a hard time putting that one down, so I'm glad you mentioned it.
Well, the way you were talking, I thought it was your pick.
No, I'm sorry, it's not. I just had to piggyback because I'm so glad at least there's one other person that I know that's not. Oh no, Escape's better than Frontiers.
No,
look, I love Escape.
no,
I like Escape is fantastic. Stone in Love, but I like it for the darker cuts because I've heard the singles so many times. Except Who's Crying Now. I don't get tired of Who's Crying Now, but Don't Stop Believin', Open Arms, I need never hear again.
Yeah, I think it is an album of two sides, though. The first, and I think it's deliberate. So the first side is very radio friendly, pop-tastic with a little bit of rock crunch. But second side, it's going into adventurous, avant-garde, experimental territory. So this is a band that is not willing to push the boundaries and the frontiers. Which is
the title song Frontiers is that it's a little bit back to their progressive roots, which that's how they started before Steve Perry joined, but that's a whole other story.
Yeah, and check out the show that Tim and I did on Frontiers on Rock Daydream Nation a couple of years ago. It's worth checking out.
Yeah.
All right, Tim Durling, you get to talk again. What's your next one?
Yeah, sorry. A lot of people say, you got to let other people talk. I'm like, well, I know. I just get excited is all. So we've talked about this band tangentially, and I could have been really cheap and done 5 bands that I've written about, but I wasn't about to do that. Here's an exception. I mean, as anybody knows, I love this band. I think they're as good as anybody might think they are. They're that much better. I think this band should have been up there with the Journeys and Foreigners in terms of album sales, and I'm a little miffed that they're not. Like, it just doesn't make any sense. And it to me, it just speaks to MCA Records not, doing the job at the time, but not putting that extra work in to make sure those albums are going to last and last and last. I could have gone with so many Night Ranger albums, but I'm going to go with the first one that I heard all the way through, which is their third album, 7 Wishes from 1985. I think that Sentimental Street is one of the best songs ever written on planet Earth. I think that it's the perfect AOR ballad. even though you might not call it a ballad, it's the perfect mid-tempo rock song. I never ever get tired of it, and it's one of those songs that it kills me that radio playlists are so tight that if you do hear Night Ranger, it's Sister Christian, which is a magnificent song, and I'm not knocking it. But Sentimental Street was a top 10 single in the US. Top 10 singles should still be played today, unless they're like novelty songs. And this is not a novelty song. But um, two other hits on this album, Four in the Morning, excellent AOR track, and the kind of song that sounds like Jack Blades could literally just write, oh, here's a song. Again, making it sound easy when we know it's not. Writing catchy songs is really hard. I love everything about this band. I love the mix of the pop melodies with the guitars of Brad and at the time Jeff. I love both Jack Blades and Kelly Kagi as vocalists. I think they're both great singers that never get mentioned as being great singers. Probably because you've got a band with two singers. It's like, it's kind of like, well, which one do I mention? And Goodbye is one of the best ballads ever written. It's a fantastic song. But this whole album is fantastic. The title song is adventurous and pushes boundaries. Faces, I've always liked. It's got an atmosphere to it that you don't get on a lot of Night Ranger songs, and yet they could rock. This Boy Needs to Rock is one good example, but I think Interstate Love Affair is an even better one. And it's also a shame that that song isn't regularly brought up as one of the best driving songs of all time. So even though I could have easily gone with Dawn Patrol or Midnight Madness or my personal favorite, Man in Motion, I'm going with Seven Wishes.
Thank you. Night Ranger. I have to admit, the first Night Ranger song that I was ever familiar with was Sister Christian off the Boogie Nights movie. Motorist.
That movie gave that song new life, for sure.
Absolutely. All right, Parish, what's your next pick?
Okay, before I go on to my next pick, I nearly went with Dawn Patrol. That was in the running for my number 5. I was there pretty much from the beginning with Night Ranger. Brilliant band. And you've got 3 out of 3 when it comes to Journey. I also think Frontiers is the best album. In fact, I'm not actually that keen on Escape. I think Escape's a bit wimpy. It lacks that cut that I think that Frontiers has. So I think, Frontiers much better album. Right, well, I'm going to go for another album that might not be considered AOR. I'm going to be really interested to see your take on this, Peter. I'm going with Jimmy Barnes for The Working Class Man. So I absolutely adore this artist, and I love this album. The AOR credentials, it's got Jonathan Cain on it, who co-wrote some of the songs. You've got Tommy Thayer on it. Backing vocals, you've got Kim Carnes on it. On drums, on at least one track, you got Mick Fleetwood on it. But for me, it opens with my favourite Jimmy Barnes song, I'd Die to Be With You Tonight, which I think is just a brilliant AOR song. The way it builds. Ride the Night Away, American Heartbeat, No Second Prize. I just think it is absolutely classic. So in this case, AOR stands for Australian orientated rock, obviously, as opposed to American. And then, of course, it's also got his signature song, Working Class Man. Why this album wasn't huge in America, I have no idea. It should have been. Why it wasn't huge in the UK, I don't know. I was into Jimmy Barnes because I'd seen Cold Chisel come over and tour a few years earlier. I just think he's got such a brilliant voice. He's the superstar that most of the world doesn't know about, in my view. And my favourite Jimmy Barnes album and my second favourite AOR album.
Well, when you said that, I was going to fight you, and then I just thought about it, and I go, No, you're kind of right. So I sort of reversed my position within a nanosecond. It's pub rock, but it's AOR. And it's Australia's take on AOR. And he's got all the elements there. He's got all the players that are, why wasn't he big in America? Well, I think, have you ever heard of that cliche, selling ice to the Eskimos?
Maybe.
It's very, very tough because the American market was kind of it's a club. There are a lot of well-established artists. I mean, why would you want to have another artist that sounds like this and sounds like that? How would I describe Jimmy Barnes in that era? He's like John Mellencamp. He's like a Bruce Springsteen. Songs about the working class. It would play to the Midwest in America, but that sort of market is so hard. This album charted in the hundreds in the Billboard. It had a little
109. It got 109. Yeah.
109. It was in a Ron Howard film that was called Gung Ho.
That's right.
It was in the credits at the end, which was renamed Working Class Man in Australia. That didn't do really big business. So I think it's circumstance, but he's got the pipes. He's got the rock voice. He was actually asked to audition for Deep Purple. Also, he was in the mix for Van Halen, but let's face it, everyone was in the mix for Van Halen. But Jimmy Barnes, I cannot say, he's an absolute icon, a legend. And in Australia, for the working class man, the song is kind of a mini national anthem. Personally, I like Cold Chisel better because I think the songwriting is a little bit less corporate because you've got probably one of Australia's greatest songwriters in Don Walker. He's up there with Bob Dylan, in my opinion. But this is a very fine commercial album, and it should have done big business for him.
And
so.
I mean, they certainly threw everything at it, didn't they? I mean, with some of the people they've got on it, you got Stevie Van Zandt on it playing guitar as well. So they definitely picked a few names.
Yeah.
I mean, another artist he reminds me of in a similar vein is also Bryan Adams. I think kind of similar vocals. The only difference between him and all the ones you've mentioned, he's better. I just think he's awesome. And how, as I say, he wasn't... I mean, with that talent and that voice, he should have just broken worldwide, I think.
But
anyway, I'm biased. I love him.
Oh, look, I appreciate that. And his voice he's got a sharp voice. He's a belter. And a lot of the artists that we're talking about in AOR have got much sweeter voices. And maybe his voice was a little bit too sharp for American radio. You know what I mean?
Maybe.
That's why I've got this theory why pub rock in Australia did not translate to America, because it's a bit rougher, it's a bit ragged. We're used to it. But America, it's a bit more polished. They, the vocals need to be a little bit more cleaner, and maybe it was just too sharp for that market. That's my theory.
You're probably right, but nonetheless, Rod Stewart made it, didn't he, with his vocals?
Well, I was going to say it certainly didn't hurt AC/DC, but I mean they were not that they were AOR, but
yeah, I'm talking about in the genre of AOR,
and probably at that time as well. I mean, he certainly wasn't a smooth singer. I mean, it's still one of the best gigs I ever saw. Was Slade with the headliners and Cold Chisholm were the openers, and they are two of my favourite vocalists in Roddy Holder and Jimmy Barnes.
Well, I can imagine. Can you mention the drink rider backstage?
Exactly.
Well, it would have been like to be a fly on the wall there.
Glam rock, pub rock on that tour, I'll tell you. So.
Just hook them up to an IV.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Actually, in here in Canada, I remember seeing the video to Working Class Man back in '86 with footage from that movie Gung Ho, which soundtracks could be a big deal. If that movie had been a big movie, who knows? I mean, that could have been a big song. But I think most people know, if they know Jimmy Barnes at all internationally, it's because of Good Times by NXS, his vocal turn on that, which is great. I mean, he's got that raucous rock and roll. I mean, it's almost maybe a bit of Joe Cocker,
Yes.
a little bit of that too. But
Yeah.
it's funny because I was explaining to someone younger that I used to work with in more recent years in the internet age, Jimmy Barnes is now known as the Screaming Cowboy because there was you know what I'm talking about, Paris. There was
Yeah,
a
yeah.
Vine that circulated, and it's some dance song, but it's basically got Jimmy Barnes and the cowboy out just screaming his head off. But might I mention, screaming in tune. You know, he was a melodic singer in that raspy vein. So,
And
I think
and it,
Mark. No,
it's
go ahead.
got. I mean, I've seen that, and it goes on forever. And it's like a 24-hour
Oh,
video on
it's crazy,
YouTube.
and
But and
so
it's
I
got
said,
millions and millions of
yeah,
views on it. So
it's probably like, who is this guy? And I'm thinking that's Jimmy Barnes, and I don't even know how it came across my attention, but I think another thing as far as why he didn't break big, Martin Popoff would say he didn't move to the States. You know, and he wasn't where the record company was. He wasn't in their faces. He didn't have possibly American management. That there's a reason why a lot of Canadian acts, I'm just about to get to one, don't break big into the States and they can be household names in Canada. Sometimes you got to be where the movers and shakers are. So,
A
um,
hundred, 100%. I put it in this way, and I'll just finish this point because we could do a whole show on this. If your head office is in New York and you've got a little branch in, like an offshoot of whatever record label in Sydney, the expectation is that we're not going to. Why would we want to market a little band in Sydney or an artist in Sydney where we've got artists that are in New York that do exactly the same? It's a cost thing, isn't it?
oh
So
yeah,
I think there's an
yeah.
expectation if head office are calling the shots, you've got to move over there. And that's why bands like Little River Band, In Excess, AC/DC, they did the Tread the Boards in Australia. And when they did their apprenticeship, they went overseas and just toured, and just based themselves there and just
At
got in
least
everyone's
move
face.
at least move to the UK, like where you
Yeah.
know correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't and I can't think of his name, but In Excess's manager, did he not move to New York at some point
He
for
was
that
back.
very
Yeah,
reason?
he was around in New York,
Because
definitely.
they became huge, and I don't think they ever moved to the States, but they were huge for many years.
They may not have moved to the States, but they certainly planted themselves. There was like a couple of years that we just didn't see them. They were just touring
Yeah,
the college circuit and then building and building. You've just got to go overseas.
they
yeah.
were definitely in the UK a lot during that period.
Yeah,
Really.
absolutely. All right, back to the top five greatest AOR. I'm going to pick Foreigner 4. I think this is a masterpiece of its genre. Uh, Mick Jones, he's the songwriter with Lou Gramm, the wonderful vocals of Lou Gramm. This is basically, if you're going to create a radio station from scratch, there's going to be songs off this album that are going to be on playlists. I'm talking Jukebox Hero. I'm talking about Waiting for a Girl Like You. I'm talking about Urgent, which is in anybody's language, it's just a great song. Great songs, melodic, great arrangements, well crafted. I can't fault this album from top to tail. Even the deeper cuts, like Don't Let Go, I'm Gonna Win, Woman in Black. There's rock crunch, but it's not enough to be abrasive. And I think that's the important thing in AOR. The rock can't be too abrasive. The guitars can't be too much fuzz, too much feedback. There's just a right amount of polish and, the way the sonics run that it just, turn on the radio and it's not offensive. You're not going to turn it off. And I think this particular album was built for it. I think it's probably one of Mutt Lange's greatest. I mean, everyone talks about Hysteria, Pyromania, but I think the production on this album is absolutely chef's kiss. It's perfect for the genre, and they base their reputation on it. Timothy, I think this would be up there in your
This
hierarchy of.
this almost made it. This was another one that almost made it. I highly recommend the deluxe version because there's some extra tracks that didn't make the main album, which are almost as good as the album. But yeah, and it's a little bit like Frontiers in that side one has, for the most part, the hits. I think Urgent's on side two, the first song on side two, but after that, there's some of the deeper cuts, but there's some of the best songs on the album, like Don't Let Go and Woman in Black and Girl on the Moon. Um, yeah, really, really good. And what's interesting about that album, it's definitely got the Mutt Lange touch, but he doesn't figure into the songwriting at all. Or at least he's not credited. And I have to thank Mutt Lange. If he thought he contributed to any of the songs, he would be credited.
Yeah, I think because Mick Jones was such an alpha male, and he would have plied his weight and said, "Back off there, mate. This
Yeah,
is my
you're the
show.
producer. Yeah,
You
yeah,
produce." Where
yeah,
there's a power imbalance, I think Mutt Lange can take over.
yeah,
Like Def Leppard.
yeah.
Puppeteering, but not with this band. I think Mick Jones was the
No,
actual a force of nature.
yeah, I
It
think
was.
Mutt probably.
It,
Go ahead.
no, sorry, go on. I was going to say it was also fairly early, wasn't it? So he was still finding his feet. I mean, he didn't
Yeah,
get any writing credits with AC/DC, didn't get any writing
Uh,
credits with
yeah,
Boomtown Rats. I
yeah.
think I think he needed somebody like Def Leppard, who were a young band that he could influence a bit more.
you know, and for that matter, he doesn't have any songwriting credits on High and Dry either.
Yeah, that's true.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
But the thing I like about Foreigner is that a lot of their lyrics, if they were in the hands of other people, it would come across as insincere because let's face it, AOR can cover a lot of sappy, pappy, schmaltzy rubbish.
yeah.
And
If
it's
all you did
all,
was read the lyrics,
yeah,
yeah,
it's all about the delivery. It's all about the conviction. And boy, oh boy, nobody does melancholy and drama like Lou Gramm and Mick Jones. And it's all on this album.
yeah.
And, it makes you can hear the broken romances and the torture of somebody in a lot of these songs. It's just, it's gold. So, yeah, I love
He's
it.
probably got the best AOR voice, I think, Lou Gramm. I mean, he is absolutely fantastic. And that album nearly made my cut as well. It didn't because I just do not like Waiting for a Girl Like You. I just do not like that song. So that kind of took it down a notch. But the album is brilliant. In fact, you could pick any of their first four albums, I think, and it would work. So definitely a good pick.
Fantastic. All right, Tim, what's your next pick? Last pick. This is the pick.
So we're up to 1986 now, and this is one of those cases where the album sleeve was printed, but it wasn't released till the next year. So it will forever drive me nuts that this album says 1985 on it, but it didn't come out in 1985. That is a minor OCD thing of mine. And we're going to return to my home country for one of my favorite sort of unsung bands. They're still around today and they're still making good music. They made some inroads in the US, but in my opinion, they should have been every bit as big as the likes of Night Ranger or Survivor. And I'm talking about the band Honeymoon Suite. This is their second album, The Big Prize. Uh, if there's, it looks like the scribbling on there. I got the band to sign it in 2008. This album was produced by Bruce Fairburn and it was engineered by Bob Rock. It has got that huge sound that would attract many a group to Vancouver and get their albums done there. This album had their single US Top 40 single in Feel It Again, which is another one of my all-time favorite songs by anybody. It's one of the ultimate feel-good anthems. It comes on and I just get pumped up. But one by one, Wounded, Words in the Wind, Once the Feeling, Bad Attitude. There isn't a bad song on this album if you like this type of music. Johnny D has got one of the best AOR voices. He's not a name most people will recognize, but to me, he's just the perfect kind of singer for this material. Derry Green, the guitar player and one of the main songwriters, is basically our Eddie Van Halen. He's a shredder, but he also knows how to write really catchy songs. most people, if they know one song by Honeymoon Suite, it's probably the song that kicks off their first album in 1984, and that is New Girl Now. But that's not their top. That did not hit the U.S. top 40. It was Feel It Again that did. The ballad "What Does It Take" was also almost a top 40 single from this album. I think this is an excellent album. It's a triple platinum album here in Canada, so that's 300,000 sales. Their first two albums both hit triple platinum. The third one hit double platinum. They were a big deal up here, and they can still do well touring like bigger clubs and theaters and opening slots for bigger shows. But man, I think they could have broken through in such a big way and had been one of those bands that now can go on tour and has a dozen songs that you're going to have to hear. This is one of those bands that should have at least a dozen songs that we're all sick of. But again, being from Canada, they didn't move. They stayed in well, they're from Niagara Falls, which is where the name kind of came from. They never moved into the States. They never had American management, and I think that hurt them in the long run. They were on Warner Brothers Records, and they had big producers, big sound. They got on a lot of big tours, but just didn't break big in the US. But it's still one of my all-time favorite albums. And I think it's a good bridge between AOR and hard rock. To me, I compare these guys a lot to Night Ranger because they looked more like a hard rock band than they often sounded. But they could rock at the same time. That's my last pick.
Thanks, Tim. I'm not familiar with that band, so I'll check it out. Thank you very much for that. And Parish, what's your final pick?
Well, firstly, great pick, Honeymoon Suite, and I love that band. Their latest album's pretty good as well, actually.
Yeah, they put an album out in 2024 and an album out in 2025 real quick.
Yeah.
And one more thing about like some people might know them as the band that did the theme from the first Lethal Weapon movie. So there might be that connection there. It's like, why do I know that name? If you're big into movie soundtracks, that might be why.
Okay, so my favourite AOR album comes from 1989, so a bit later than you might expect. And it's this one, Giant, Last of the Runaways. If you put the needle on the record and you hear the first track, you think you're in for a Van Halen treat. I'm a Believer just has such a great guitar soloing, kind of eruption-like beginning, and then it kicks into the main riff and the vocals, and it is just such a fantastic song. Innocent Days follows it up. I Can't Get It Close Enough. I'll See You in My Dreams. Just AOR banger after banger after banger, and it is. I just think it's fantastic. Dan Huff does the lead vocals and guitar, and he's just a superstar, I think, on it. They're still going. I think they split up and then reformed. They've been releasing albums in recent years. Whilst I don't think they've ever quite got to that level again, the recent albums and even the album that came after this are still very good. But it is, again, sort of AOR with a bit of a heavy rock edge to it. But yeah, just love this album. And if I was to recommend one song of all of the albums I've picked today, it would be I'm a Believer. So for those who haven't heard it, go off and hear it. You're in for a treat. It's a brilliant song and a brilliant album. And something I didn't know until I was just reading the sleeve notes again is it was partly recorded in England. I never knew that. I just assumed it was in the States. So there you go. So it's even got an England connection to it. So yeah, brilliant. There's the band on the back looking all rugged.
Yeah, Dan Huff
cowboy boots.
Went on to become a huge, like not only a session guitarist, but also a really well-known producer. Like producing all sorts of artists, everybody from like Faith Hill to Megadeth, and I'm not even kidding.
Yeah, I was going to say, real wide range, a lot of sort of country, didn't he? He's done a lot of country stuff. So
yeah, well, folks, I've enjoyed this show because I'm learning about some bands that really didn't make it out in Australia. So got the pen and the pad out and, writing some down. So put that album up again. I love that album cover, Giant. Yeah, that's great. It's got a real cinematic feel to it, isn't it? Like the movie with, That's
Yeah, I think
the
that is
James
from a
Dean
film.
movie, isn't it? Giant. Yeah.
Yeah.
Was it James Dean or was it Rock Hudson? It was one of those.
James Dean
I think.
and Rock Hudson were in
Oh,
that
okay.
movie.
Oh, there you
Yeah.
go.
I'll See You in My Dreams was like a top 20 single. Like it was a fairly big song.
Yeah,
That's the
they
ballad
did pretty
from, yeah.
well. Yeah.
I think one of the problems, I never miss an opportunity as a Y&T fan to say this. I think one of the big problems is that they were on A&M Records.
Yeah.
Because
Well,
otherwise, if an album had a top 20 single, it should have at least gone gold.
A&M,
I think
MCA, there's a bit of a problem.
Yeah.
but it was also timing, isn't it? I mean, that wasn't really. I mean, it wasn't grunge yet, but you're right in the middle of hair metal, and I think it probably got a little bit lost.
And they weren't
amongst all
quite
that.
hair metal. They weren't
Yeah.
quite. I know that I read about them in like Hit Parader and stuff, but they weren't quite there. Which, is all the more. You bring up an excellent point, Parish. That's all the more reason why it's a surprise that the damn Yankees record did as well as it did.
Yeah.
Classic. All right. Well, thank you very much. Well, my final pick, and it's not actually my favorite album by this band, but I picked it because I think it is the greatest AOR album, in my opinion. My favorite album by this band was actually Isolation by Toto, but I sort of think that's a bit more new wave and pop. So for the purposes of this exercise, I've actually picked Toto 4 as my pick as the greatest AOR album. I think this album is perfection. There is so many hooks. You could put it over the board and pick up so many fish if you were a fishing trawler. It is hooks, hooks, hooks. The playing is magnificent. People think of Rosanna. People think of Africa. But there's so much more. You've got Make Believe, Afraid of Love, Waiting for Your Love, Good for You, We Made It. I think what makes this band so special is the singing of Bobby Kimball. To me, he is the singer of Toto. The wonderful guitar playing of Steve Lukather. You've got, the keyboard work of David Paich. I just love this album so much. I don't think there's much more I can say. I think everyone knows the songs. Tim, I'll defer to you. What do you think of this album?
Well, I mean, what can you say about an album that starts with Rosanna and ends with Africa? I mean, and when I hear stories like, Steve Lukather's told the story many times, that whole Rosanna was supposed to end da-dum, da-dum, da-dum. That whole end part where that was all live in the studio, spontaneous. That whole jam section was never written into the song. The band was just that good that they just went with it. And that's including Lukather's solo at the end of that, which is an amazing guitar solo.
One of the great outro solos. But
yeah,
there's a lot of, there's rock, there's R&B, there's jazz, there's pop. But to me, I think this really, you can put it under the umbrella of AOR because it's got all of that. And I just think the playing on this album is sensational, considering they were the session musos.
Yeah.
You look at the family tree of this band, and it's basically popular music of the 70s and the 80s.
Right. It's listening to the radio in the 70s and 80s. And I mean, Toto were basically the house band for Thriller, basically. And if it wasn't them, it was Greg Phillinganes, who was eventually in Toto. So I think just about every song from 4 could have been a single. One of my favorite songs that wasn't a single is Good For You. To me, that is like one of the catchiest songs in the album, and that just speaks to the strength of the album. But We Made It could have been a single. I mean, yeah, it's a fantastic album. It's just, I love giving Isolation that plug because it is different for them, but there's nothing wrong with 4.
That's my favorite album by Toto, but for the purpose of AOR, I said Toto 4, and I love this album so much.
Yeah.
This has been wonderful. I've enjoyed today. So Tim Durling, thank you for coming on the show. Tim is we'll do some more shows in the future. Just check out Rock Daydream Nation. Please like and subscribe. Parish of Rock. we'll plot our next. You go up into the attic and pull out an album, and we'll do a review. Get better, mate, because I think it's around midnight in London.
It's nearly half past. It's nearly 12:30. So.
Oh, absolutely! Kudos to you,
but,
mate.
You know, but it's Friday night. You know, so you've got to stay up late on a Friday night, haven't you?
You've got to stay up. Friday night's all right for fighting, as they say. Put your comments. If you agree, disagree, we love reading your comments. Please like and subscribe to Rock Daydream Nation, and there are more shows coming soon in 2026 and beyond. All the best, and cheers. All the best. See ya.